Have you ever wondered how a machine actually learns to make a decision? It sounds super complex, right? But it turns out it's a lot like a detective cracking a tough case. Today, we're going to break down how a machine can learn to identify a cat, just by gathering clues. Okay, so imagine we're presented with a lineup of suspects. Some of these animals are cats, and some, well, they're not. Our job, and the machine's job, is to figure out who's who. Right now, it's just a jumbled mess. So here's the big question. How can we build a system, a model, that can look at this group and automatically, and more importantly, accurately, separate the cats from the imposters? That is the case we're cracking today. Every good detective starts by gathering the clues. We need to examine the evidence we have for each of our animal suspects to figure out what makes a cat, a cat. Here's how we translate what we see into data a machine can actually understand. Instead of just seeing an animal, the machine examines specific, measurable features. These are our clues. Does it have pointy ears or floppy ears? Is its face round? Does it have whiskers? Every single animal in our lineup gets profiled based on these features. Think of this as our evidence file. So, we have our clues, but a detective needs a method to sort through them logically, right? For our machine, that method is called a decision tree. At its heart, a decision tree is really just a flowchart. It's a series of simple, targeted yes or no questions that guide you to a final answer. It takes a big, complex problem and breaks it down into a sequence of much easier choices. And this is what a finished tree looks like in action. You start at the top, at the root, you ask a question, and based on the answer, you follow a specific branch down the tree. You just keep answering questions at each step until you land on a final verdict at the bottom, what's called a leaf, which tells you cat or not cat. It's a really clear path from question to conclusion. But here's the secret to being a great detective and a great decision tree. You have to ask the best questions first, the questions that get you the most information and crack the case the fastest. The way the tree finds the best question is by aiming for purity. Its goal is to ask a question that splits our jumbled group into new, smaller groups that are as uniform as possible. Ideally, we'd want one group of all cats and another group of all non-cats. We've got 3 potential first questions we could ask. One about ear shape, one about face shape, and one about whiskers. So let's play detective and see which question actually does the best job of splitting our suspects into pure groups. First up, let's try splitting by ear shape. We get 2 new groups. The pointy ears group is mostly cats, and the floppy ears group is mostly non-cats. Not perfect, but you know what? That is a very strong start. Okay, next, face shape. As you can see, this split, well, it isn't very helpful at all. Both groups are still a really messy mix of cats and non-cats. This question creates more confusion than clarity. Our final option is whiskers. This gives us one fairly pure group, but the other is still quite mixed. So comparing all 3, it's pretty clear. Asking about ear shape gave us the cleanest split. That's our best first question, hands down. Now, our eyes can see that ear shape was the best split, but how does a machine know this for sure? It needs a mathematical tool, kind of a detective's magnifying glass, to measure the purity of each split precisely. That tool is called entropy. You can just think of entropy as a score for messiness or randomness. A group that is completely mixed, say 50-50, cats and non-cats, has the highest possible entropy score. But a group that is perfectly pure, 100% cats, has an entropy score of 0. The goal is always to make splits that result in the lowest possible entropy. This concept is absolutely key. The more mixed and uncertain a group is, the higher its entropy score. So the goal of the decision tree is to always choose the split that causes the biggest drop in entropy, the one that reduces the messiness the most. So now we know the detective's secret. Find the question that lowers entropy the most. Let's see how this method is used to build out the entire tree, step by step, until the case is completely solved. The building process is actually pretty simple when you break it down. You start with the whole group. You find the best split, the one that lowers entropy the most. You make that split. Then you just repeat the exact same process on each new subgroup, asking, okay, for this group, what's the next best question? You just keep splitting again and again until the case is solved. Now, this brings up a really critical point. A detective who asks too many questions, who focuses on every tiny, irrelevant detail, might start seeing patterns that aren't really there. They can overthink the evidence. The exact same thing is true for a decision tree. So the algorithm needs stopping rules. It stops if a group becomes 100% pure, obviously, but we also tell it to stop if the tree gets too deep or if a group is just too small to bother splitting any further. This is crucial to prevent something called overfitting, which is when the model learns the initial evidence too well, almost like it's just memorized it. An overanalyzing detective might fail on a new case, and we want our tree to work on new, unseen animals. And this is the result. By repeatedly asking the best possible question to reduce entropy, the algorithm has built this entire logical flowchart. It learned the rules directly from the data, creating a perfect guide for identifying cats. So we've built one smart detective, a single decision tree that can logically work its way to a conclusion. But that leaves us with a final, fascinating thought. If one tree is this powerful, what could you do with the combined wisdom of hundreds or even thousands of them? What if you could consult an entire forest of detectives? Well, that's a case for another time.